And we are recording on Tuesday, April 16th, 2024 at 11:04 a.m. Eastern Time with Miss Clare Lopez. And um yes, as I was just telling Miss Lopez, the show is going to be I'm not sure what the details are, but streaming to Mike Lindell's Frank Speech or Lindell TV. So the link to that will be in the description, as well as, and I think they work with Mr. Lindell, is the Genesis Gold Group. So as I've said, heading towards World War III or not, maybe it's just my own paranoia. For the same reason I have this podcast on external hard drives. Also, the only really thing I invest in. Also, I don't understand investing, so I buy gold, and that will be in the description as well. And I know it's very clunky right now, but I don't have all the details on that, so I apologize. But um, so it's kind of been the last couple of times I think I've had you on. It's like I have you on, and then something happens in the Middle East. I'm like, well, I have to have Claire on again. So it's always, I'll see you next Thursday, and then it's always like, can you do it tomorrow? And so that's where we are today with, I believe it was Saturday night or Saturday
That's right.
evening. They shot
Between
like,
Saturday and
yeah,
Sunday morning, depending on your time zone where you were.
yeah. And for everybody listening, please go into the description. Please go follow Claire on Twitter. Please go to any of the links in the description. But could you please give everyone I guess a shakedown of what it is that's happening or happened?
Well, we have to go back to April the 1st. And on that date, it is understood the Israelis um, took out a very senior commander of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force. This was Mohammad Reza Zahedi. And this took place in Damascus. No, it was not at a consulate. No, it was not anything of a diplomatic facility. It was just a building somewhere nearby to the Iranian consulate, but not the consulate. A building that the IRGC Quds Force rented out 2 floors out of the 4 floors in that building for their military operations center. And Zahedi and his fellow Quds Force officers were basically the command node of the Iranian regime for Syria and Lebanon. And that's why they got hit on April the 1st. And of course, the spin began immediately. And they struck sovereign territory of the Iranian Islamic Republic. No, they did not strike anything diplomatic. It wasn't the consulate. It was a building nearby. And it was the military. It was very much a military target, military command center, as I said, for the Quds Force operations throughout Syria and Lebanon. Those operations directed certainly at Israel, but also at the United States and our personnel and bases in the region nearby there. So that set the precedent, that set the stage, maybe, if you will, for what would come next. And over the next couple of weeks, the Iranian regime, trumpeted to the world that we're gonna take steps. We're gonna retaliate. This was awful. The narrative again. They struck sovereign territory because diplomatic facilities abroad of a country are considered the sovereign territory of that country, and rightfully so. But again, this building where these Quds Force commanders were located and sent off from there to meet their virgins was not diplomatic facility. But the narrative began, as I said, immediately, and the regime in Tehran was broadcasting far and wide its intent to strike back at Israel in retaliation, in revenge for that takedown of those very, very senior, important Quds Force officials. And so then, fast forward to this past weekend, and that would be, depending on your time zone, either late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, 14 of April. And for the very first time ever, the Iranian regime launched from its own territory, also from the territory of Yemen, but from Iranian territory, a barrage of drones, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles aimed at Israel. And because the region, Israel, the United States, and our allies had so much advance warning, because the regime in Tehran trumpeted this for the last 2 weeks, they were prepared. But still, I think it was quite remarkable the way that this alliance came together in coordination that night between, again, Saturday, Sunday of this past weekend, to defeat, utterly defeat this attack by the Islamic Republic against Israel. And so you had the United States, you had Britain, France, but really importantly, and this is something that mustn't be missed, this was a very important step, that joining that Western team, if you will, of the United States, Britain, France, and of course Israel, were major Sunni states in the Middle East, specifically Saudi Arabia and Jordan. I think others, perhaps the UAE, also involved to some extent, but joined in the joint team effort to defeat this assault by the Iranians. And in the end, even though it was over 300 projectiles over just a period of hours launched at Israel that night, I'm looking at the notes here, 120 ballistic missiles, 30 cruise missiles, and 170 suicide drones. They're called suicide drones because they're one way. They go to the target, hit it, intended to hit it,
Yeah.
explode, and that's it. So, of all of those, over 300 projectiles, 99% were intercepted before they ever touched Israeli airspace. That is amazing. And it was due to a multi-layered Israeli air defense system, which includes, at the lower end of distance, I guess, the Iron Dome system, of course, and that's for short range. Then you move up the scale and you've got David Sling and Magic Wand, and then the Arrow systems. I guess there's like 2, 3, and 4, and that night they used mostly the systems 2 and 3. And they, in addition to aircraft, aircraft launched, of course, by the Israeli Air Force, their F-15s, 16s, and 35s were in the air, intercepting these missiles in midair. It's amazing to even think of how they did this, but they did that. Jordan, and now here's the important part. Jordan, too, sent up its Air Force, its pilots, to intercept these missiles coming across its airspace. If you think of the geography from Iran, towards Israel, you've got to cross the Persian Gulf, if you go that way, or you got to cross the land mass of Iraq, of Jordan. And in any case, some of these were coming over Jordanian airspace, and the Jordanians sent up their own pilots and intercepted some of these projectiles too. Now, the interesting part about this is that, Jordan has every right to defend its own airspace. And this was a violation of that airspace. But what is maybe not quite as, openly announced by the kingdom in Amman is that, in essence, yes, they were defending their own airspace, but they were also defending Israel. They don't have to say that, and that's not necessary. They have every right to defend their own airspace, and they did. And then Saudi Arabia, which I don't think sent up any aircraft, but I think their contribution was more in terms of the intelligence and the plotting of the trajectory, the targeting, as these missiles were coming across its airspace. and they shared that information with the team, the entire team that I just mentioned here, so that those projectiles could be intercepted, by either the Israeli Air Force. U.S. Had naval vessels off the Mediterranean coast of Israel, also I think in the Red Sea, and those U.S. naval assets, planes. Let's see. The announcement from the Pentagon on Sunday, April 14, was that U.S. forces had destroyed more than 80 of the UAVs, unmanned area vehicles, or the drones, and at least 6 ballistic missiles that had come out of Iran and Yemen. So that was the U.S. Participation in that as well. And then, of course, the British and the French, and I think their forces were in the region too, contributing to the overall collaboration of the defeat of this Iranian attack. So that's kind of what happened. And luckily, I mean, not just luckily, this was tremendous technology, tremendous collaboration, cooperation, and I really want to emphasize how important it was that the Sunni states of the region, and again, in particular, Saudi Arabia and Jordan, understand that the enemy is Iran. They're not fearing any kind of missile attack from Israel. They know who the enemy is and who the enemy is not. And I really think that once Donald Trump is back in the White House, the impetus for the Abraham Accords will pick up once again. This demonstration, of these Sunni governments in the region, joining in to defeat this assault by the Islamic Republic, I think speaks volumes about not just how they view their place and Iran's place, in the region, but also what is going on behind the scenes. That even now in these last few years, when the Abraham Accords have, kind of been kicked to the curb along with MBS and the Saudis and everybody else, even so, there are definitely, discussions and talks and collaboration going on behind the scenes between these Sunni states and Israel. And I think you'll see that much more out in the open again, and with a revival of the Abraham Accords, once we have a change at the top here in the United States.
As always, you are a walking encyclopedia. It is. It's very impressive. So for me, then no pun intended, that the 50,000-foot view is just from my own kind of detached 33-year-old memory. It's like there's always kind of tit for tat as long as I can remember. It's always, attack here, attack there. Most recent being October 7th, and then the Israeli strike. And
well, you know what? Let me jump in real quick
sure,
right here. As you mentioned that reminded me of something I might have said, should have said. And that is that this senior Quds Force commander, this General Mohammed Reza Zahidi, who was taken out there in Damascus on April the 1st, he absolutely helped to coordinate the attacks of October the 7th, the Shabbat massacre. That is one of the key reasons why he was targeted, along with his team, in that April 1st strike in Damascus.
So to me, what's interesting is, or at least notable, again, as somebody who has a biology degree and has no experience in any of this, is that what you said, it was launched from Iran. It wasn't the whole proxy game. It was from Iran.
Yeah. For the first time ever.
Yeah. It's like Vietnam. It's we're in there and the Soviet Union's in there, and it's a tit for tat thing. The Soviet Union's in Afghanistan and we're in there with Zbigniew Brzezinski. It's still both sides know it's a proxy, but no one actually, it's not until, the Soviet Union and Cuba and, we're in Turkey, but there was always the no one is actually shooting at one another, right? And to me, that's, I guess, what's notable is shot from Iran.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then you have the US shooting down Iranian drones, and then you have multiple other countries. You have specifically Saudi Arabia. And I saw somebody comment this, and Saudi Arabia is only concerned, they only want world peace because of money. And I'm like, who cares what the reasoning is? But
No, honestly, I think that the Saudi leadership, in particular MBS, that's Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, son of the king, they understand very well where lie their own country's national security interests and future economic technological development interests.
yeah, yeah, they're not.
And it's all of that is threatened, by a nuclear Iran, which is where Iran is going, and they know that there's of that regime in Tehran. Yes, it's about their development and modernization and all of that, sure, but what country wouldn't?
Yeah,
Um, but it's also a very real threat assessment. Um, that they understand very well where the threat comes from, and they know it's not from Israel.
yeah. I mean, and one of my best friends is like a super liberal guy, and he told me why he's voting for Trump. And he kind of said, and I think we all probably would admit to this, that there's a lot of items that are, luxury items. The items that are not luxury items are gas price, inflation, groceries. And you do
Mm.
kind of have that moment of clarity where it stops being, when if you have to, cut something off, you have to trim some fat, you do go for the core thing. And the core thing is that Saudi Arabia is they're looking at money, they're looking at secure, they're not stupid. And they know that this is, I guess, a tinderbox. So that's, but again, so that's kind of crazy is that you have, well, one, you have, it's, you could say it's because of their own airspace, right? But also, I mean, it's not significant that they all joined together to shoot down Iranian drones. Um, and did Iran then signal that the attack was over? That, to me, that
Yeah,
looks a little more like
their
tit for tat thing.
representative at the United Nations issued a statement on Sunday, that would be the 14th of April, that it's over, it's done. We did our retaliation, and sort of trying to, um, I guess, tamp down any expectations of further hostilities. Well, sorry, it doesn't work that way. You attack a country directly with a barrage of over 300 missiles and drones. No, you don't get to say, okay, now it's over. And it won't be over. There is a pause right now. Perhaps Israel and its leadership, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, maybe the Minister of Defense, you have Gallant, others, maybe they wanted to strike back immediately. I mean, even over the weekend immediately, but have decided not to do that, to hold back at least for a little bit. And maybe that's the right decision. Um, to let the magnitude of the Iranian defeat sink in and be broadcast. That they fired over 300 projectiles, drones, and missiles, and not a single one harmed a single Israeli, except I think there was one little girl down in the Negev desert, whose house, a 7-year-old little girl, her house was hit by a missile, and she was injured by shrapnel.
Hmm.
That's it. But and not to diminish, that the seriousness of, this little girl, innocent child, being hurt by an Iranian missile. But the point being that overall, that attack failed miserably and almost completely. So let that sink in for a while. Let that be, um, broadcast, and it doesn't really even need too much broadcasting, because the world knows this. But certainly the regional governments know this. The GCC countries, Gulf Cooperation Council countries, um, they know this, and they realize the importance of their own contribution to this alliance that came together to defeat that attack. Let that all sink in for a while. And at some point, the announcement has come, out of Jerusalem, that there will be retaliation for this attack. You can't not respond to an all-out attack that absolutely was meant to cause massive damages, horrible casualty count, absolutely meant to damage Israel massively. And only because of the cooperation of this alliance that came together was that not the outcome. Okay. All of these, info ops narratives flying around that, oh, it was all arranged behind the scenes. And, the United States agreed with Iran that they could do whatever they wanted, but within a certain, limitations, within certain limitations. That's baloney. That attack was meant to cause massive damage and casualties in Israel. And again, only because of the brilliance of the Israeli multi-layered air defense, the bravery, the expertise of its pilots, together with the support of all of these allies we've talked about, US, UK, France, Saudis, Jordan. What was that attack foiled, and completely foiled, or nearly so, 99% foiled. So after whatever time the Israelis decide is appropriate, there will be retaliation. There has to be. You cannot restore deterrence, which obviously failed here. Deterrence failed. Ours, Israel's, it has to be restored. And the only way to restore that deterrence is to strike back, and strike back very hard at the Islamic Republic. There have been various ideas floated, I guess, maybe you might say, about what could be struck, what could be hit in that retaliation. Perhaps for me, the most important, or, the key kinds of retaliation that would make a difference in terms of deterrence in the future, as well as the retaliation, would be aiming at economic targets. What keeps the Iranian regime in power afloat? Well, unfortunately, it's the Biden administration. And the failure of our administration to enforce sanctions, which are not waived, they're still in effect, but they're not being enforced. Sanctions against oil and energy exports from Iran, in particular to the east, China being the biggest customer there. And so if Iran's oil production and export capabilities were degraded, let's say Bandar Abbas, Karg Island, places like that, and if the Biden administration begins to enforce sanctions, if the Biden administration goes back to the sanctions waiver that they granted to Iraq and to South Korea, I think we talked about this. Both of those countries buy energy from Iran, and they both owe a lot of money to Iran for their purchases. South Korea, oil; Iraq, I guess it's mostly natural gas. They owe Iran for their purchases. But because of the sanctions up until now, well, up until the current administration in Washington, D.C., they did not pay those bills. It's $10 billion for Iraq, and it's $6 billion for South Korea. So what needs to happen is that those waivers of those sanctions go away. The sanctions come back on. The transfer of those funds, $10 billion from Iraq, $6 billion from South Korea, halted once again. That is the kind of economic measure that I'm thinking of first. There are other things we could think about, but I think economic first. Enforce the sanctions, freeze, these payments that waivers previously might have been granted for, um, and think about Iran's energy export capabilities.
Excuse me. For Iran striking back, how much of it, just to put on like a thinking cap, how much of it is saving face to their own populace or their own, I guess, radical contingent? How much of it is, I don't doubt, I mean, you don't fire 300 projectiles without the hope. Is there any of it that's sort of a, because to follow up and then go, all right, now it's over, it does kind of seem to a degree like saving, it's like the meme of like
Yeah.
the guy going to like the car salesman, it's happened a million times, and they're in like a soundproof room and he's like, I'm waving my arms and yelling at you so my wife thinks I'm getting a good deal, and I know you're not going to give me a good deal, but this is going to make me look good. And he's like, so I need you to nod. And then the salesman's like, all right, fine, I'm nodding. And you see the woman outside like, he's really getting me a good deal. How much of it is, to a degree, that?
It is in part, but I would say not for the Iranian people, who
No,
absolutely
sure,
loathe and despise and hate the regime that oppresses them for now 45 years,
sure.
but for its own
At
top
the
inner
at the
circle,
apex, yeah,
yeah, of the
that's what I'm
regime,
talking about.
the Akhundha, the mullahs, um, the military forces, the IRGC and Quds Force and so forth. Um, yeah, because it was a Quds Force command post that was struck there in Damascus. Yes, and if we understand the culture, in which the Iranian regime operates there in the Middle East, and by the way, which Israel understands very well too. Um, it's as Harold wrote, a terrific expert on the Middle East, formerly at the Pentagon and Department of Defense, wrote in a recent article called "Misunderstanding Iran." As he wrote there, that culture over there is a shame honor shame culture, and when a hit like the one on April the 1st against those Quds Force uh, officials in Damascus happens, uh, simply as you say, Tommy, just as you say, for the sake of honor,
Hmm.
they have to strike back. And trying to message that, okay, now we did it, now we're done, it's all over, stop, everything stop, it's done. That's just you know uh, trying to put a lid on things, and knowing how badly they failed, number one, but what a great demonstration. The night skies were lit up, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what I mean.
um but knowing that they failed, nevertheless, now very much afraid of the retaliation that is sure to come, because Israel is understanding that Middle East culture of honor and shame also. And to restore, as I said before, restore that deterrence, um, as well as, indicate, show to the Islamic Republic and the world, that they're not just doormats that can be, attacked, and will say, okay, well, you really didn't harm us, so we'll just call it a day. Take the win, I guess somebody in the Biden administration said. No, they know they can't do that. But yeah, the other thing to say here, I think, is that the Iranian regime understands that, aside from Israel, its its biggest enemy is its own people, who would dearly love to be rid of that regime, and perhaps might think about how, at this juncture, um, when an Israeli retaliation attack takes place, how can they maybe take advantage of that? How can they leverage that in some way to be rid of this oppressive regime? I'm sure
Hmm.
those discussions, those thoughts are going on.
Is there any validity to the fear or potential of the honor shame culture itself kind of driving us all off a cliff? They're fire at Israel, and who
Right. Could
knows?
it spin out of control,
Is
you
there,
mean?
maybe there's someone in the very inner circle in Israel going, yeah, we don't want war with Iran either. That's nuclear, but we can't not respond. And then now the president's
Yeah,
been said, well, Israel, they blew up a library, we can't not respond. And
yeah.
how quickly is it just like, well, listen, we had to fire 300 megatons at Shanghai because we can't not respond. At what point
Well,
do we walk
the
off a
thing is,
cliff?
it's not just in the context of this immediate
Yeah.
April the 1st hit against the Quds Force guys, April 13, 14, Iranian attack against, it's not just that. It's the bigger picture. And it's why the Saudis, why the Jordanians um, joined in, uh, not just to defend their own airspace, which again, perfectly legitimate, and they should be doing that, but because they understand the bigger picture. It's not just about these two, tits for tats, or call it. I mean, go back to October the 7th, right? The Shabbat massacre, which kicked the whole thing off. These regional players all understand that this would not end, even if they did not. The Israelis, did not mount a retaliatory strike at some point in the near future. Even if they did not, it would not end, because the Iranian regime, this regime in power since 1979, will not stop trying to obliterate the Jewish state of Israel until it is stopped. It has to be forcibly stopped from that objective. They will not stop otherwise. And the regional players, these countries, certainly including Israel, but the others, understand that. The Biden administration really doesn't. They're part of Harold Rhodes' article, Misunderstanding Iran. They think, I think their worldview, number one, is not an America First one. It is America is a force for ill in the world, and so we and anyone who is allied with us needs to be taken down a peg or two. This is how they think. But they also think that everything in the world can be solved by diplomacy and concessions and collaboration. No, it cannot. In particular, in the region of the Middle East, with the culture as it is there. But they don't get that. They're invested, in the Department of State and diplomacy, and taking the attitude that, well, maybe we're to blame, maybe we and our ally Israel, maybe it's our fault, so we'll just be more conciliatory, we'll just offer some more appeasement. Would you like some more money? How about a few more billion? Would that make you happy? No, that's not going to work. And the regional players know that, all of them, both the for and the against Israel, know that.
Mm.
But our own leadership apparently does not understand that at all.
Is there any, is there any, I guess, force behind the idea that, you can only defensive measures, they do have a limit. At a certain point, does Israel, let's say, exhaust their defensive pile, like, the anti-ballistic missiles that we were building in like the 60s and 70s? Some of them are really great. I think it was I forget what it was called, Sprint ABM, 0 to Mach 10 in 5 seconds, so under
Mm,
100 Gs of accelerate. It's great.
wow.
If you look at a video of it, it doesn't look real. It looks like one of those old 1905 videos that are sped up. It's
Mm,
crazy.
mm.
And there it works. It looks great. And they're like, we can put these around like Camp David and maybe the White House. And I was like, well, what about the rest of the cities? And I was like, well, we can't do that. Is there a point at which these things do
Well,
fail? Like,
I
can
mean,
it happen again? Can it
yeah.
happen
I mean,
tomorrow and the next day
this
and the
was
next day?
part of the strategy. I think we should understand of the Islamic Republic to um, at least test, but also to overwhelm, if possible,
Attrition. Yeah.
that air defense system of Israel, and to not only to gauge what its response would be and how effective it would be, but also to deplete, just as you're saying there, Tommy, to deplete Israel's stocks of the missiles, the other, defensive measures that would be needed for defending against a mass assault like that of hundreds of missiles at the same time. And with here, keeping in mind Hezbollah, which was not involved specifically in the night of the 13th, 14th, but that reportedly has something upwards of 150,000, 175,000, I don't know exactly, numbers of missiles, which are being kept, hoarded, held back, and many of them upgraded with these precision guidance tipped, missile kits to turn essentially just a dumb ballistic bomb missile into a precision guided one. All of that supplied, of course, by Iran over the last how many years. So, yeah, the thought that Israel's stocks of defensive munitions and so forth, could be depleted. That's very much part of this. Now, there's one other thing we might mention, and that is the Iron Beam defense system, air defense system that is really in just a crash development stage right
The
now.
laser
The
defense.
laser system,
Yeah,
exactly,
it's wild.
which is so much cheaper, infinitely renewable, rechargeable,
Hmm.
um, and
Instantaneous
can
shoot down.
take out, a whole array of incoming at the same time for pennies on the dollar, or maybe we should say shekels on the whatever.
Whatever their dollar
Um,
is.
yeah, compared to something like Iron Dome, or even the other systems, David Sling or the Arrow system. So we know that that's under development. Don't know exactly what stage it's at. Can only imagine, Rafael Industries and the others involved must be just, working day and night to get that to developmental stage that it can be deployed. But that's what they need, so that whatever that strategy might have been of overwhelming overwhelming the air defense systems of Israel, but then depleting its stockpiles of defensive munitions, that challenge can be overcome.
Hmm. Yeah, it is kind of another take at Star Wars,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is, I mean, yeah, I mean, speed of light, infinitely renewable. I mean, it's not instantaneous, but it's for all intents and purposes, it's you get rid of the idea of having to hit a bullet with a bullet. It's yeah. Um, how does Iran, so let's say what is an Israeli, just pure conjecture now. What does an Israeli response look like?
Well, as I mentioned a bit ago, I think that among the possible targets for such retaliation would be first the economic ones. As I said, the capabilities of the Islamic Republic to generate income, and that being, of course, its energy exports, oil. We talked about that, so that's one big category. Another category might be Iran's nuclear weapons program and various sites, that are dedicated to developing and deploying a nuclear weapon. And that those sites are well known to Israel, probably have been, mapped out long time since. Those could very well be targets, and timely targets, because as the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency of the United Nations, has been reporting, uh, Iran is very close to having a deployable nuclear weapon capability, even for what is known by the IAEA inspectors, who are not always allowed in to places they want to inspect, for example. Even from what's known, though, the amount of enriched uranium that Iran either has or is capable of producing in an ever shorter, tighter time frame, um, just blows to bits the provisions of the JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action nuclear deal from back in 2015. So the most recent reporting coming out of the IAEA is that Iran either has or will have on hand very quickly enough enriched uranium to make, X number of warheads within a week, within 2 weeks, within 1 month, it's this many, within 3 months, it's this many. Um, So those targets inside of Iran, Natanz, Isfahan, those places could very well be on its target list. And then finally, the third category would be regime targets, meaning IRGC and Quds Force command posts, military, sites inside of Iran and maybe elsewhere too. So that would probably be the third category.
What does future U.S. involvement look like? How long until? Well, I guess how does the whole thing spiral? Because if we have multiple nations now shooting it down, are we going to have multiple nations coming to Iran support?
I don't see that Iran has any regional allies in the Middle East. Its major allies are China and Russia, and their backing, for example, is important for Iran at the United Nations, the Security Council, which, by the way, held a meeting yesterday. That is Sunday the 14th, or I should say 2 days ago, Sunday the 14th. And I don't have a readout on that. I don't think they put out much information after that meeting, or at least if I missed it. But in any case, it's at venues like that Russia and China support Iran. China, of course, being its biggest energy customer, and of course Russia being a major customer for Iranian drones, the same kind of ones that were shot at Israel. That Russia uses to attack civilian targets, apartment buildings and clinics and hospitals and schools in Ukraine. So in the region, though, of the Middle East, Iran doesn't really have regional allies. Maybe Qatar. That might be about it.
Hmm. And then lastly, some of the articles that were immediate or articles and statements that were immediately coming out were saying on Saturday, imminent Iran action or retaliation within the United States.
Mm.
What is that? Is that just fear, or is that just clickbait, or is that,
No, I don't think it's only clickbait. It might be that too, but with our wide open southern border of these
well, yeah.
last few years, we have no idea really who all has come across that border. I mean, we can only reasonably expect, that our enemies have taken advantage of that wide open southern border, and that would include jihadis of all kinds, maybe even, Iranians, IRGC, Quds Force. We know, for example, from open source reporting, that the FBI had been tracking possible Iranian hit teams out to assassinate some of our senior former national security leadership, like former National Security Advisor John Bolton, like former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who have always taken a tough line against the Islamic Republic. So, we also know that there is a massive network of Hezbollah cells inside the United States, and that goes back decades, literally decades. But what if more have been coming across? We don't even know. And that's in addition to other kinds of jihadis, Al Qaeda, Taliban, Islamic State, and whoever else, in addition to gang members, MS-13, for example, other kinds of criminals, traffickers, human traffickers, child traffickers, and of course, narcotics traffickers. And then, not to be left out, the Chinese. We know from reporters down, in Central America area, Panama, Darien Gap area, that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young, fit, military-aged men, military-looking Chinese men have been swarming our border. And from some of the characteristics that have been observed, like I think we talked about this before, the drinking of the chicken blood thing, that they may be identified as jungle tigers, a special operations unit of the People's Liberation Army in China. All of that could very well be here. And I think we'd be remiss not to expect that all of the above we just mentioned have taken advantage of that open southern border and are already inside the United States, establishing cells, maybe conducting pre-attack casing and surveillance. The FBI even, I mean, amazing. They stopped chasing Catholics at mass and parents at school board meetings long enough to warn Director Christopher Wray in front of Congress multiple times now this year, 2024, warn, as he's been saying, the lights are blinking red for a terror attack inside the homeland. So the answer is yes. And to what extent might we think that these various different enemies that we just mentioned, are they working together? I don't necessarily think they're all operating discreetly. That's ETELY, right? Discreetly, but that they may be collaborating with each other.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes me think. I didn't know that the FBI had said that.
Multiple times been in front of Congress since January this year. Yeah.
James Bamford's book, I think it's like a 2003 book, or maybe 2002, Shadow Factory, the post 9/11 ultra secret NSA. The first half of the book is kind of a recount leading up to 9/11, and that's, I think it was 2000 and 2001. I think they were classified briefings, but it was kind of the same words. It was just, we don't know when, but it is coming, and just like all the canaries are dead, all the lights are blinking, and there's like a probability. It's like DC or New York, or it's coming, and it's going to come in the
Well, I
next year.
mean,
It's going to come in the
it's
next 9 months.
because the circumstances for that to happen have been openly set over the last 3+ years by the
Yeah,
current administration here. I mean, everybody can see this. The situation has been one great big invitation.
yeah,
Um, there's no way this is not happening.
yeah,
So really, and not to scare the socks off of all of our listeners and viewers, but that you realize that you need to take this seriously. Situational awareness, family plans for communication. Having stockpiles on hand of bottled water, the usual bottled water
hmm,
and long lasting food supplies, that sort of thing. And then I would say a shout out to our local law enforcement, because if we go by what happened back in 2020 with the rioting all over our cities, all over the United States, the federal forces are not riding to the rescue. They're
of
just
course not.
not. And so it's going to be down to the local communities. And I think in particular, county level sheriff's departments to be prepared for this, to be aware that this is happening, and for local communities of citizens to be, in communication, two-way, with local law enforcement, like those sheriff's departments, to be prepared and to know what to look for, to understand, what the situation could be, not 100%, but could be coming this year. So that's the sort of thing that I would offer, in addition to just, as I said, scaring the socks off of everybody.
Yeah. And lastly, and I always kind of come back to this, is, are all the skirmishes breaking out at seemingly an accelerated rate? Does that lead to a greater or smaller chance that China's going to move on Taiwan? Are they looking at it, and obviously it's the $10 trillion question. Are they looking at it and just saying, like, hold off, let the world kind of, go to hell in a
Well,
handbasket, and then we'll take it,
yeah,
or vice versa?
that's a very good question, and I think it's very obvious that Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party are watching developments, uh, both with regard to Russia and Ukraine and the Middle East, and how the United States in particular is responding to these, how the United States is standing up to these aggressors, be it Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, or Russia. Same thing. They're both, warlord aggressors trying to, invade a sovereign country and slaughter its people. But China's watching all of that, to be sure. And they've made known again, repeatedly, often, that their intent is to take over Taiwan. And it may well be that they see their window of opportunity between now, April 2024, and at least November
Hmm.
of this year, the election, November 5th election day in the United States, but probably more broadly up until January the 20th of 2025, when a new administration might be taking office. Um, but yeah, they're definitely, watching, engaging um, their chances of succeeding in this window of weakness that is the Biden administration. So no question they're looking at all of that and making their calculations according to what they're viewing.
Good point. Yeah, if they're that's how you know like the winds are changing is when it's when the articles change from, Trump will never be in office again to here's what to expect from a second Trump administration. Yeah, you'd have to imagine they're looking at that between now and then. Everything's heating up. I mean,
Hmm.
it would obviously be insanely newsworthy, but it'd almost not be that crazy if China moves on Taiwan. It'd be like, yeah, that makes Russia's in Ukraine, Israel and Iran are going back and forth, and the U.S. is shooting down Iranian. It would almost be, sadly, it would almost be par for the course. You'd be like, yeah, of course something's gonna pop off there. I mean, are they looking at that just kind of like, yeah, let's, it's like during like a mass looting, like, yeah, just, pull your
Well, as
mask
I
up and
said
go grab a
before, this
TV.
is this is a window of weakness.
Oof.
In the final months, we hope, of a Biden administration here in the United States. And our adversaries and enemies and allies and friends and partners across the world all are watching and taking note of how we respond to all of this. And we're not projecting an image of strength and power and influence across the world at this moment. No.
No. Well, that's terrifying. But I know you need to run. I know you have another engagement coming up, so I will let you go. But Miss Lopez, thank you for your time as always. And guys, please go in the description. Please go follow her on Twitter or any of the other links in there. And yeah, as always, thank you for your time, Claire. It's always a
Thank you,
pleasure.
Tommy. This is a great topic, perfectly timely. Thanks for
Yes,
having
ma'am.
me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Guys, till next time, thank you so much for watching.